What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and at C2E2, Rosario Dawson, who played Night Nurse in the Marvel Netflix shows, came out and said that Punisher's returning and Jon Bernthal's coming back for the role. And we'll actually play the clip here so you guys can see it.
I hadn't heard that announcement, but I found out yesterday that The Punisher was happening again. So I feel like it's my second chance, because it was the only one of the shows that I wasn't in, and I love Jon Bernthal. So let's all make it happen collectively, guys.
Now, recently, Rosario Dawson came out again and said that apparently some random fan told her that was the case, so that I guess it's not actually happening. If I'm being honest, I think it is. I think she leaked it and she wasn't supposed to talk about it, and that Disney basically raked her over the coals, so then she had to come out and say, well, some random fan told me it was true. I have a hard time believing that Rosario Dawson just believed a random fan at C2E2 and then came and got on stage in front of thousands of people or hundreds of people and was like, hey guys, Jon Bernthal's coming back as the Punisher on Disney+. You know, I have a hard time believing that's the case. So I'm gonna kind of assume that it is happening. And here's the thing. I have a few thoughts about this whole thing. I have a few thoughts about the Punisher on Disney+. I'm a little on the fence about it and really kind of worried about it. And here's the reason why. When it came to The Punisher on Netflix, it was really just kind of Netflix given full license in terms of how The Punisher could be brutal and gruesome and all the things that we've come to expect. And this is an important thing. The reason why is because I'm a little fearful that if The Punisher comes, or when The Punisher comes to Disney+, that they're gonna tone it down. Or they're going to tone it down and make it kind of like a PG Punisher. And that doesn't work. And we know that from a variety of instances in Marvel Comics when they've tried to make it work. For those of you guys who are unfamiliar, the Punisher exists in Marvel Comics in two forms. The first form is the main Marvel Universe, so the Punisher's appearance in like Civil War, and when he first appeared in the Spider-Man comics, and Welcome Back Frank, and different things like that. Then there is the Punisher in the Max imprint. And the Max imprint was Marvel's line of adult-oriented comics. I mean, sex, violence, all kinds of stuff, right? Like, these were comics that were not meant for kids. And the Punisher is every bit as brutal there. And some of the best stories ever written about his character are from Marvel Max, right? The Punisher Max run that was originally done by Garth Ennis is landmark and the stuff of legend. Punisher Born, The Cell, all those different stories were in the Max imprint, and they depict him as an exceedingly brutal character. And that's something that has to be maintained. And the reason for that is best depicted, and in fact, this was actually covered in an article that I saw that was on Amino Apps, and we'll link it down in the description. It was best covered when somebody did an analysis of the rooftop scene from Daredevil Season 2 between Frank Castle and Daredevil himself. Now, I don't know if you guys forgot that scene at all. It's one of the most iconic scenes. I don't know of anybody who could forget that scene, but it's an amazing scene that actually highlights the stark difference between Frank Castle and someone like Daredevil, right? In that scene, when the two of them are kind of having this conversation back and forth, one of the greatest lines from just the entirety of Marvel in general, of all the TV shows and films they've ever made, is when Frank is talking to Matt Murdock and he says, I think you're a half measure, right? He's like, you knock them down and they get back up. I knock them down and they stay down. And that's the thing, right? In this article, one of the things that they said is that the Punisher's a guy who puts it all on the line because he's a man with nothing to lose. And when you're a man with nothing to lose, you can basically do anything you want to. And that's the nature of the Punisher. The Punisher is a guy who has nothing to lose, right? Because he lost everything that mattered to him. And so now he'll do whatever it takes, right? He's kind of the antithesis. The difference between someone like Matt Murdock, who's kind of a high road defeatist, he would rather lose and maintain his morals than do whatever it takes to win, as opposed to someone like the Punisher, who will do whatever it takes to win. And guys like the Punisher usually always come out on top. It's not something that you see too often when it comes to films or TV shows. The good guys usually win, but that's because on a societal level, we demand that be the case. We demand that the good guy win. So we fudge the numbers, we cook the books, we sort of rearrange the pieces of the puzzle to make them fit the way that we want it to in order to fit our desire to defy reality and ensure the good guy comes out on top. But it usually doesn't work that way because the good guy goes in expecting to lose. He acquiesces, right? The good guy goes in saying, I'm not going to do whatever it takes to win. I will do whatever I can to win so long as I don't violate my moral compass. And because the bad guy doesn't have that same moral compass and will do whatever it takes to come out on top, the good guy basically goes in expecting to lose. They basically said, I won't cross this line. And the bad guy says, I will, and they win. And that's basically how things work. It's how the real world works. And the Punisher is a great reflection of that sort of difference between the high road defeatist like Daredevil and the winner take all all, do whatever it takes person like the Punisher. The TV show was a perfect instance of this. Again, that rooftop scene where he referred to Daredevil as a half measure, a guy who knew that there are some people out there that just can't be fixed. There's no way to like get them to see the error of their ways. They're not going to wake up one morning and say, oh my God, what have I been doing with my life? I've been committing crimes and stuff like that, right? It's not one of those things where the Daredevil keeps locking them up and on the 5th time, they finally come to their senses. No, right? Like, it's them just doing what they want to do because they know that at the end of the day, the Daredevil is a toothless guy, right? He will only go so far. And so Punisher is not that guy. Punisher will just kill them. Now, another thing to know is the mental state of the Punisher. That when it comes to Frank Castle in the TV show, right, in the Netflix series, one of the things that was so great about his character is you always knew he was walking a knife's edge, right? You always knew that just at a moment's notice, he could just fall off the deep end, right? He could just fall off and just totally lose it. A really good example of this didn't necessarily happen in the show, although the overall theme was felt in the show, but it was from Garth Ennis's Punisher Max, right? In a story called Up is Down and Black is White. And it was this absolute, just amazing monologue that Frank Castle has. So in this monologue, he says, there's this dream I have from time to time. And in this dream, I don't stop. I kill all the soldiers and the hitmen, the extortioners and racketeers, the dark old fucks who send them all out to fight. I hold the trigger down until they're all gone, but I don't stop. The innocents are watching just like always, the slack-jawed thousands gazing at the beast. My family lies red and shredded in the grass. I face the crowd and bring the weapon to my shoulder. If my world ends, I tell them, so does yours. The recoil starts, and then I wake up. And it's just one of these great moments, right? Because that theme was felt in the Punisher show, right? In Daredevil season 2 and the Punisher seasons 1 and 2. It was such a great idea to have because what it showed is that one, Frank Castle believes that happiness is beyond his ability to attain, that he lost that which was most important to him, he can never get it back, and he can never go back to being the man that he was before. The second thing it illustrates is that he doesn't simply just blame the death of his family on some botched police operation, he blames it on society as a whole. He blames it on people, because at the end of the day, people know corruption happens. People know that there are criminals out there, yet they turn a blind eye, they tilt their hats down, they walk forward, they pretend they don't see anything, and that innocent people are caught in the pathway of individuals just personal irresponsibility or lack of concern over corruption and things that go wrong in society. And so he blames the average person just as much as anything else because his stance is, you could do something about this. You just choose not to because you're a coward. And so looking at society in that way, he harbors resentment for effectively everybody, right? For every single person out there. And that kind of sentiment is something that you would really lose because the best way to demonstrate that anger and that wrath and that pain is the violence that Frank Castle ensues in. The fact that he throws his own individual safety to the wind, doesn't quite care what happens to him, right? This is shown in that diner fight in Daredevil season 2, right? When Karen Page was watching the whole thing go down and he's caught up in just that super violent fight, he doesn't care how injured he gets. Another really good example of this is the fight he's in the prison. Now, some of that was contextual. There was no real escape for him in that prison hallway. The doors were locked and so on and so forth. But the fact that he just throws himself at those guys, takes his hits and just keeps on going, you can tell he doesn't really care about himself. He doesn't care about his own individual safety. His concern about his life is limited to, as long as I'm alive, I can kill other criminals. But like when the time comes when all criminals are basically destroyed, what would happen with Frank Castle? This was answered in Punisher: The End, when basically humanity ends up engaging in a nuclear war that's caused by politicians and different things like that. And that he ends up finding, he ends up succumbing to radiation sickness, but he's basically led to a bunker where the last of humanity resides, which is essentially politicians and businessmen and businesswomen that are trying to find a way to basically save embryonic cells for humans so they can in turn repopulate the earth with humanity. Frank Castle goes in there, kills everybody. With the exception of that bunker, everybody else is dead. They literally play a recording where the president of the United States went crazy, took everybody out, and then offed himself. So basically this bunker, right, the people here are all that's left of humanity. Frank Castle kills them all, destroys what's left of those embryonic cells, and basically causes humanity to go extinct. Then he just goes out and literally walks into a fire, succumbs to his radiation sickness, and dies. So Frank Castle basically kills humanity. He's the reason why humanity goes extinct on Earth. But that instance is where he's just like, humanity doesn't deserve to live anymore. Humanity had its chance, and humanity did what humanity does best, which is screwing everything up. And so it's so interesting when you look at that, because in the show on Netflix, so many of those themes of what really makes the Punisher who he is are captured so incredibly well. But if this show is rolled over into Disney Plus and we get a PG rating, it's not going to do the Punisher justice. It's not going to feel like an actual Punisher show. It's going to feel like Captain America 3 Civil War, where it's more like a civil disagreement. That's what it's going to feel like. You're going to get a very toned down Frank Castle, a less violent Frank Castle, and you're not going to feel those themes that Frank is a guy who doesn't really care about his own life, who does what he does because it's really him just taking out vengeance on the world. He's not a Batman character where he's like, my mommy and daddy got shot and I want to make sure that nobody else feels the pain of losing their loved ones, so I'm going to beat up criminals in the middle of the night and hand them over to the cops. No, there's no greater reasoning here. There's no higher cause that the Punisher is trying to attain. He literally just kills people who commit crimes, and that's it. Right? He doesn't see any criminal as anybody who can be redeemed in any capacity. Criminals die, and that's the end of that. It's an absolutist viewpoint. You won't really feel that in the Disney Plus show. It would feel more like Batman. It would feel more like, well, I mean, the Punisher, he gives them what amounts to like a stern talking to, right? You know, like that's basically it, a slap on the wrist. And that's all you would really see. So I think that in order for the show to really have that gritty element, to really have that hyper-violent element, that concept that shows that Frank Castle doesn't actually care whether he lives or dies, that Frank Castle is not some high-road defeatist like Daredevil, that he's willing to do whatever it takes to come out on top to ensure that his goal is achieved, which is the death of those criminals over there and any other criminals that exist out there. This show has to have what would be a TV mature rating. It has to be a carryover from the Netflix show in terms of its feel and what we were shown to the show on Disney Plus. You can certainly have the drama with a TV PG rating, right? You can't have that. You can have those rooftop discussions between Frank Castle and Daredevil, but the reality is, without that hyper-violent element, without the instance where all those guys are hanging on meat hooks, and Daredevil comes in and he finds one of them who's still alive, and he was like, who did this? Tell me who they are. And the guy says, not they, one. It was one man. Unless you have that, then that rooftop scene is lost. That moment doesn't have the same level of significance that it does. And the reason why is with moments where all those guys are on meat hooks, or all those guys get shot to pieces when that Irish mob is having that meeting or whatever, and you see Frank Castle as a one-man army who will beg, borrow, steal, and kill in order to achieve his goal, you lose the significance of the rooftop scene. You lose the significance of you knock them down and they get back up, I knock them down and they stay down, right? Like that whole meaning is lost there. So I think in order to really feel Frank, you've got to have a mature rating. You've got to have what amounts to an R-rated TV show. But the question is that something they would put on Disney Plus? And to be honest with you guys, I think that's a hard no. I think that seeing The Punisher on Disney Plus is going to be a PG-rated show, and I really hope it's not, right? I really hope I'm wrong. I 100% hope that I'm wrong here, and I really hope it's a TV mature show. I really, really do. But with that being said, let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.